Our next example comes out of section 5.2. We're looking at transformations of sinusoidal functions. Actually, in 5.1 we did some transformations where we reflected vertically stretched, horizontally stretched, but in this section we're taking y equals sine x or y equals cos x, and we're looking especially at what happens when we change them to these, x minus c plus d. And so hopefully, again, in general, you'd be able to recognize that I'm expecting here to have horizontal translations and vertical translations. These graphs are going to move left, right, and up and down depending on what kind of numbers I put in here. So a fairly straightforward example would be just to say, describe the transformations if our regular y equals sine x function is transformed to y equals sine of x plus pi over 6 minus 7. This, I would expect x, changing x to x plus pi over 6 is going to be a horizontal translation to the left pi over 6 units. In trig, they describe those often as a horizontal phase shift, because you're talking about waves as the graph pattern is a wave pattern. They call it a horizontal phase shift. You'd still say left pi over 6 units. That's the most important part of that description. So if the question asks you for a horizontal phase shift, they're just saying how far right or left did this graph go. Now the minus 7 part is going to be a vertical translation. And this will take the graph down 7 units. Again, hopefully that's a little bit of review from way back in chapter 1. In trig, for whatever reason, they've decided to call this vertical displacement. It means exactly the same thing as a vertical translation. And so if they ask you what's the vertical displacement, you'd still say down 7 units. So this overall graph, very roughly drawn regular sine graph, looks like that. I'd have to go to the left pi over 6 units, which would make it something like this, and then I'd have to go way down 7 units, and which would put it way down here, moved left and down. Obviously, if this were a graphing question, we'd want to do a bit better job than that, but just visually so you get the idea, move the graph left, move it down, and you have the final picture.